So hello everyone, welcome to this Q&A with Mark from IE Hub. Today Mark and I will be discussing the intricacies of income and expenditure statements and also touch on the myth of the perfect I&E and then its implications for businesses and clients. So Mark, I was wondering, for those who might not be familiar, can you explain what an income and expenditure statement is?
Yes. Hi, Tinisha. So, short answer, an income and expenditure is a budget. So it's looking at everything that comes in, everything that goes out, what have you got left? That what have you got left is then your savings, your needs, your wants at the very end.
And why would you say an I&E is important for both creditors and customers?
I suppose that the I&E has different implications. From a creditor perspective, it's part of regulation. It's the best way to understand what your customer can afford, what they can ultimately set aside to pay their credit commitments. The customer, it has different value. The customer, if they're in debt, and if we talk specifically about customers in debt, the value probably isn't obvious to them. It might feel like something that's been imposed by the creditor, something that might be overbearing, something unnecessary. The typical budget that we follow the standard financial statement. That has lots of questions in. It does go into the detail of your income, how's the income broken up, your expenses, your fixed, your flexible spends. It has a lot in it, and that can be daunting for the customer, but it does have value. That as a customer, if you can do your budget, if you can understand what you have coming in, what you have going out, what's essential, what's important, then you can see on a page what have you got left to pay debts. And ultimately, you can also look at your debt balances. What's your debt balance and how much have you got left at the end of the month to be able to meet those credit commitments? Or in some cases where you can't, what's the shortfall? Do you need help with your budget to help maximize that first the income or reduce your outgoings? And then if your disposable income is going to fall short of your debt commitments, what can you do about it? What are the debt solutions? Obviously, as IE Hub, we don't provide debt solutions. We're not regulated to, but we have lots of partners in the industry which we can help customers connect with.
Amazing, thank you. So going on to now the myth of the perfect I&E. So there is a common belief that there is such thing as a perfect I&E.
Yeah.
And can you explain why that might be a myth?
There's probably not a straight answer. It's probably helpful for the podcast. So it would be quite a short session. You can get a perfect I&E, but really it comes down to the purpose of the income and expenditure and the circumstances in which it's been pulled together. If we said for maybe what could be your typical consumer, typical customer who doesn't have financial difficulties, who aren't under lots of pressure to pay debts, where their situation is probably more consistent, so they've got a regular income and actually month to month the bills are about the same and they're meeting their credit commitments, so their outgoings in from a debt perspective are consistent. In those circumstances, you can probably get quite close to a perfect budget. Of course, every time if you or I go shopping, pushing the trolley around Morrison's, we'll spend something slightly different week on week. So you're never going to have a budget, an income and expenditure that is exactly the same every month. And that's not the purpose of what we do. It's looking to have something which is consistent, something which is there, and it's a plan. And that's kind of important when you kind of then look at what a perfect I&E is. So customers not in financial difficulties can have that consistency, and therefore they can get really close to a perfect I&E. So that's their circumstances. They've got quite stable circumstances. And then we think about the purpose of the I&E. So somebody in that type of scenario might be thinking about building a budget because they just want to start saving. Well, how much can they afford to save? What can they put away every month? And actually that can then be quite regular. Or it might be that they're wanting to kind of take out additional credit. We're going to go for a loan. And actually that loan repayment is probably going to be consistent month on month. And therefore we can factor that into a budget. We've got consistency and we've got a clear purpose for that income and expenditure. Now, through IE Hub, we probably deal more so with customers in financial difficulty. So their circumstances are a lot more volatile, and that's kind of probably the biggest challenge that we have around having a perfect I&E is that customers are coming through what we would term a life event. So that could be a loss of a job, it could be sickness, it could be marital or a partnership breakdown. They're big transitions, and actually, and kind of that word, the transition, that's the important piece. It's not something which is clear overnight. From one day to the next, things will take time to evolve and adapt, and ultimately that's where those circumstances become more difficult to control, and we have to transition through that level of change. So if we use the example of a relationship breakdown, going from two incomes to one income in a household, well, how do you adapt? How do you look at, well, what are the things that we paid for as a couple, and are those things still needed? Are they still important? Are they going to have to be managed on one income? So things like your rent, your council tax, they might not change overnight. But then are there other things that you might want to cut back on? So your TV subscriptions. Well, actually, that was a subscription that partner one took out. So I'm not bothered about that. We'll change that, and the household budget can adapt. But things like that happen over a period of time.
Yeah.
Also, because of those situations, and say going back to your typical IE Hub customers, the customers in financial difficulties, they're in a position where we know that ends don't meet. Their debt commitment is probably bigger than their disposable income. And for those customers, they're probably going through a cycle of what we'd say robbing Peter to pay Paul. One creditor will be paid 1 month, another creditor will be paid another month. We need to try and cut through that. We need to get to a point where the budget over a period of time becomes more consistent. The income becomes more consistent. If it's a job loss, that might be going through the benefit claim process first and foremost. That can be a period of months before each of the elements or the claim process itself is completed. So going from a period of an earned income to a benefit income, and then going through those adjustments in terms of spending to get something which is level. So that makes getting a consistent budget difficult. It's not impossible, but it does mean that we're working probably more on a plan. And I think that's the difference, is that purpose comes from a perspective of, I need to plan for change and I need to use the budget to manage the change.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And how would you say the pursuit of the perfect I&E can impact both agents and the customers negatively?
I think we start with the agent side. I think the pursuit of that I&E, really it can become overbearing for the customer. So if an agent's looking through a customer's income and expenditure and they're probably drilling down too much into the detail, that detail for those customers probably doesn't exist. They're looking at making those transitional changes. They may not be entirely sure themselves what's going to happen from one day to the next or month to month in terms of repayment plans. So from an agent perspective, that can be putting pressure on that particular customer. And if we create undue pressure on that customer and ultimately on their budget, that leads to potentially unrealistic, unsustainable arrangements, customers making commitments that they haven't quite looked at in their own head. Ultimately, we know through kind of going through the IE Hub journey, we try to give the customer that breathing space. Do the I&E before you speak to the agent. Start to think about that plan. So which are the subscriptions that we're going to take away? Through IE Hub, obviously, we can help the customer kind of do that benefit check. So things that they might not been aware of. So we can help them start building that plan and get a plan as we sit here today and share that with the agent. The agent's in then a more comfortable position to have a more meaningful discussion with the customer, can set potentially short-term arrangements, short-term forbearance, because we know that their customers on a plan or building that plan to get something which is more sustainable. I suppose that the customer is probably in a really stressful scenario. So if they are managing that life event, depending on what the life event is, and particularly because they have multiple debts, mountain debts, they're in a position where they need that time. And within the industry, there's something called breathing space, and it kind of does what it says on the tin, credit as well as there's regulated and sort of voluntary breathing space. But giving that customer the time to understand their budget, to prepare it at their own pace, to kind of walk through it and understand it, that's the important bit that we can do for the customer. Having that pressure, ultimately, exactly as I said, for the agent, that creates unrealistic outcomes, unsustainable outcomes, and ultimately doesn't solve any problems. We're kind of back around the loop again of, well, can you do another budget? Can you look at it again? Probably one of the important things that we have within IE Hub is the customer's ability to come back and make changes and update the budget month on month. So if we expect the situation to be volatile for a short period, the customer might have to update their I&E maybe every other month as a benefit claim's made and their income goes up, as they've made spending decisions, they've adapted to change. I mean, some of the probably the easier things for the customer to do might take longer time. So as an example, if I spend £150 a week for my family on the big shop, but actually my situation changes, I need to think about how do I do that now. That's that shop has been done as a habit. It's been very habit forming. I go in, I go up each aisle, I know the things that I buy, I know the things that we like, and that just becomes second nature. It's kind of then having to go through and be really sort of consciously thinking about, well, what can I change? How do I go from option A to option B? How do I adjust those? And that has an impact across everything. And we're kind of talking about it in pounds and pence on a budget, but there's the habits, there's the reactions, there's kind of human nature, individuals' resilience to all those changes, depending on what the circumstance is that we kind of need to think about.
Yeah, it's almost like a mindset shift, isn't it? So why do you think some people seem to have the perfect I&E, but then how does this contrast with those who, like you said, do experience them life shocks or vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I think the real difference comes in the purpose of the I&E and sustainability of that customer situation. You might, and I suppose there's a lot on kind of listening to some of the other conversations I had on the different podcasts about perceptions and social media and why people do things in a certain way. From a budget perspective, we can look at somebody and if they're on a regular income job, they're looking forward, they're saving, that all looks rosy, and that is probably an easier situation to manage versus somebody who is in financial difficulties. They're managing those income shocks. There's so much else going on. They're dealing with different pressures, different challenges. When we bring in things like vulnerabilities, whether they're transient or otherwise, that they're all things that are getting thrown at that customer to have to adapt to, not just month to month that will show on a budget, but day-to-day life challenges. And those situations just compound the financial side.
Yeah. So then moving on to kind of like the realistic approaches to I&Es, what should agents focus on when reviewing I&E statements?
So from our perspective, when we look at and we do lots of the data stuff, not kind of part of my day to day, but we've got people who sit and look at the quality. And we'll kind of, it's not a term that we like to use kind of for all the reasons that we've always spoken about. But when we look at the I&Es and we look at trends and we look at what are people spending day to day, we're following sort of natural curves. So we've looked at things around fuel and so yeah, gas and electricity spend is probably an obvious one because that's been quite volatile over the last year, 18 months. But when we see customers recording their energy spends, they're recording it in line with kind of how energy prices have changed. So we know when people record an I&E through IE Hub and they've had the time and the space to think about what's going on, they're recording information accurately. And that's what we need to think about is the budget fair and accurate as of today? So as an agent, I don't need to be thinking about going into all the detail. There are guides within our journey that help the customer get it right. And ultimately, we know customers are spending the time to try and get it as close as they possibly can to their living situation today. So typically, say that an agent can look at the income, look at how it's being gathered. Does it look about right for that individual's that their current circumstances? If it doesn't, they're potentially missing out on additional income. The system's going to flag and show them the benefit side. So they might be the first conversation. Probably then want to look at the income and expenditure in reflection to the standard financial statement. So is the customer overspending in particular areas? Are they underspending? and then respond, and the system will do a red, amber, green flag depending on how far away that customer is from the standard financial statement trigger based on their circumstances. And it's about having a kind of an open conversation with the customer, but actually we need to give them space to change. When the SFS does have flexibility, so allowing customers to spend more in the right circumstances, and having an explanation around that. So things like particular medical needs might drive up somebody's food bill, so they've got to have a certain diet. It's allowing that flexibility in the budget, and not saying this is a hard and fast line, and making everybody ultimately look the same, which we're not. We're all different. We've all got different family compositions, different habits. The SFS will cover that flexibility to a certain extent. Well, if there's one adult property to have children, there's flexibility to that extent, but actually not about to our individual needs. We might, we will see customers who have underestimated spends, but they might have done that because actually they want to present a budget which they think a creditor might want to see. And if that I&E is flagging as lots of underspends, that might be true today. And we might see customers who are making excessive cutbacks. Something like that, it really, on a long-term basis, isn't sustainable. That could lead to, if we think about somebody cutting back on their food budget to a kind of an excessive level, longer term, that's going to lead to health problems. Equally, the system will flag the other side. So we've got customers who maybe haven't started to adapt to their change in lifestyle. They may be spending an excessive amount. If we use that food spend as part of their budget, they're still going for your high-end brands. Yeah, kind of they've not made those kind of budgetary choices yet. The system would flag that. So as an agent, I can see kind of what does a budget look like? Does this look about right? The system's flagging red at either end. That's where I want to have a conversation and either encourage the customer to make a change, and that could be spend more, it could be spend less. Or if the customer's not able to spend change, just spend change. If the customer's not able to make that change, just document it for them on their budget. And that change may be fair, or the lack of change rather, may be fair and reasonable because of, say, some health conditions that they're needing to manage.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And are there any common mistakes that you know of agents when they work on I&E statements and how they can kind of avoid making them?
Probably not. I think kind of the system's good that it guides the customer through. So we get, and I know we're talking about perfect I&Es, but I'd say we get accurate and reasonable I&Es delivered through by the customer, and that those circumstances will be based on this point in time, and a week, a month later, that situation might have changed. But we get quality information through from the customer. So from an agent's perspective, it's really about the paperwork's being done. That agent can then just focus on the quality of the conversation, understand what's going on for that customer, interpreting the data, the output, the final number that the system gives them, and then agree with that customer what's the right way forward. Now, that way forward might be, we need to give you some forbearance, we need to hold off on kind of any collections activity, or we need to give you some support on this particular account. It might be that you need support as a customer, but we can't help you. You need third-party debt advice, and we make a referral. Whoever the agent, each organisation will have their own policies, procedures, referral partners. And each organisation will do what they should do from that respect. But the agent, because they've got the information in front of them, can have that conversation with the customer and ultimately get to the right outcome that is needed in that circumstance.
Yeah. How can technology like IE Hub assist in creating more accurate and realistic I&E statements?
I think the way we work the budget, it's very much, we are a tech company. We have got lots of tech features that can help the customer get all their information together, and they sort of range from things like open banking that can just do a straight pull from the customer's bank account. The information that was live across the last 30 days goes into the I&E, goes into the right space. So we've got that side covered. But equally, we know customers that they're not sure about open banking. It's been around a little while, but it's not something that you'd sit and talk about with your friend in the pub, and it's not something gonna kind of see day to day. So the system covers the other end, and different organisations, different partners that we have will want evidence. Actually, customers will be really comfortable to go out. I know what a bank statement is. I've had a bank statement as long as I've had a bank account. I'm quite happy to download that and attach that to my I&E from an evidence perspective, or even take photographs if I'm still getting paper statements through the door. We can do that. But from a tech perspective in I&E Hub, a lot of the journey is guided without the customer actually even realizing what we're guiding them. That starts at the very, very beginning, where we have intelligent questions, where we set the right questions based on the customer's circumstance. So if you've got children, we'll ask you about childcare expenses. If you don't have children, well, that's completely irrelevant. They're taken out of the picture. So you're not having to fill in a full budget for things that just don't matter. The system also has little guides in, so it'll help you spot even just typos. So if a number becomes too big, so unless I'm a Premier League footballer, I'm not going to be earning £30,000 a week. Well, the system will flag that and drop that into the budget and allow you to just draw your eye to the particular point, and I can correct it. I can adjust what I've put in to what it should be.
Yeah. Do you think that's particularly beneficial for people who have like maybe mental health problems, who find it like really overwhelming and explain the situation on the phone, to just kind of do it in their own time online?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, probably jumped past the biggest benefit of I&E Hub. It's online now. It is going to present challenges to people who maybe aren't digitally savvy, and there are other sort of channels into I&E Hub which help that. But in the main, our journey, it's online. It comes with all the features and benefits of any online tool out there, and that I can do it at my own time, my own pace, when I want to do it. There's not somebody sat at the other end of the phone waiting for me to find a number, to go through my online bank account, to look through a piece of post, to give you a piece of information. There's not a pressure situation of, Mark, how much do you spend at the supermarket? How much is your water bill? I'm not having to think so much quick fire. I could do a bit today. I can leave it. I can have lunch. I can come back. I can do a bit more. I can pick the kids up from school. I can finish it off. And when I'm ready, then I can share it. It takes away that time pressure. That's a huge advantage. And when we get feedback from our customers or system users, that's one of the big things that consistently comes across of, this is mine and it was done without that time pressure.
Yeah.
And equally, say it's purpose of the system, kind of why we exist. We do it once, do your I&E once in I&E Hub, and share it with all the other organisations. So you're not worried about, from a personal point of view, how consistent you are, because it's the same I&E that goes to everybody else. It's not, well, I was asked about a food spend yesterday, and did I say the start of this call, did I say £150? Did I say £140? Or was it 160? It's that consistency. I've got it on screen. I've got a record. They're not blind numbers that I've thrown down a phone at somebody and hope they give me the right response back. And then I'll get a letter confirming a payment arrangement, but I didn't know, and I can't remember everything that went into getting to that point. Customers have got their dashboard. They can log in. They can see their budget. They can see where it's gone. And actually, from a manage and change, planning ahead, well, actually, if things are different next month because I've gone back into the world of work or I've claimed a benefit, I can log back in, I can update it, I can let the organisations know all at once consistently. And that's probably the big features when we talk about perfect I&Es. It's less about it being perfect and more about it being fair and consistent.
Yeah, definitely comes full circle, doesn't it? So all creditors get the same information rather than different. Yeah, so we briefly touched on the SFS earlier, but I was wondering if you could kind of expand on I&E Hub's SFS integration and how it benefits both creditors and customers.
Yeah, so the SFS is the standard financial statement. It's owned by the Money and Pension Service. Importantly, Money and Pension Service, they're an arm's length government body. And the fact that the SFS exists gives a consistent budget and methodology across all of financial services and beyond, where other organisations are adopting that. Within the SFS, what it does is it sets a kind of a guideline amount for key areas of budgeting, and those guideline amounts are scaled based on the family composition. So within our system, we will have essentially we'll stretch those guidelines if you are a single person versus if you're in a partnership, and they'll stretch again depending on whether you have a child, two children, three children. Those guidelines change, and that's the SFS structure. From a customer perspective, customers don't need to worry about the SFS. The SFS is built on ONS data. It's reviewed and changed at least annually. So it's reviewed at the start of each financial year. But if there are any impacts from an inflation perspective, the SFS is reviewed. It's updated to make sure that it is fit for purpose. So those guideline amounts, they will change based on where we are in the world today. If things become more expensive, the SFS values will move up in line with that. And the system is built to manage that. As a customer, you will never see it. You don't need to worry too much about it. As a creditor, and as part of the license and conditions that were set by the Money and Pension Service, we can use those trigger figures. We can set those guides, and we can make them visible to the organisations who are assessing the budget, but we can't make it visible to the customer.
Okay. What sets iHub apart from other tools or methods that are out there for managing I&E statements?
Probably the most unique thing to iHub, the biggest value that we can possibly add is that it's a one-to-many journey. We will see, and for kind of as long as I've been in collections, income and expenditure has kind of been part of the course, whether that's a 5-minute conversation, what can you afford to pay a day, going all the way through to the introduction of the SFS, or kind of the common financial statement as it was before. You will spend time with those creditors filling in those income and expenditures over the phone or in different portals, and then repeating it. And typically customers who are in financial difficulties won't just have one debt, they will have multiple debts, potentially up to 9 different credit organisations. So a mix of your typical financial services products, your store cards, your credit cards, your loan debts, all the way through to things like your energy and your water bill. All those organisations have to have affordability conversations, have to capture income and expenditure information. And as a customer, you've got to go through those processes either over the phone, online, or on paper. With IE Hub, you do it once, you get your I&E, you review it, you make sure you're happy with it. It's fair, it's consistent, it's accurate, it's a reflection of you on paper in terms of your monthly spend. And then you decide who you want to send it to. So I don't have to have all those conversations. I will add those organisations to the list, and I'll press go. And those 10 organisations, 9 organisations will receive my income and expenditure in real time without me having to repeat myself time and time again. And the repetition, obviously, it's a big time drain, and there's an accuracy point which we mentioned earlier around just going through reliving those numbers. But actually, when we think about our typical users who are in financial difficulties, they're probably going through or managing some kind of life event, planning their way out of that. There's that experience to relive, and almost trying to have to justify why this is happening. So whether it's a job loss or sickness or a relationship breakdown, we always hear from our customers that they've had to relive that. They've had to almost justify their position. Why are they in debt before they then get into recounting their income, their expenses, their debts? That's the real value of iHub. That's the difference. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, 100%. I remember speaking to a customer, and she said that she was in a very financially beneficial situation. She had a very high income, and then, like I said, a life shock happened. She had lost a family member, suffered with mental health, and then she had to go on to benefits. And had such a drastic difference in her income. And she said, I fell into debt, and I didn't want to explain to the person on the end of the phone because I felt like I didn't deserve to be in that situation. Not that anyone does. But that's a big reason why she loved iHub. So that always sits with me as well.
Yeah, I think that's those two extreme examples are kind of sort of perfectly encapsulate the difference between someone who could have sort of pre that situation could have produced a perfect budget, and the the irony of that is they probably didn't need a budget. They were quite happy day to day, living their life, comfortable in terms of their spending, had disposable income, doing what they needed to do. And actually, on the flip side of that, that's when the planning becomes essential, and it's that managing side. But
Yeah.
yeah, totally agree. That's it, and it's really it's a good example that kind of none of us are insulated from that type of change. Things happen to us, or life happens. It's about that resilience, the ability to then plan ahead and again move from a position where your budget is never going to be 100% perfect. It's about building the best plan you can, and then being able to communicate that plan to a creditor to say, well, this is where I am today. This is what the income looks like today. This is what the outgoings look like today. This is what I've got. I think this is fair. This is reasonable. This is kind of where I want to go.
Yeah, 100%. And just before we finish off, I thought that we could kind of touch more on vulnerabilities. So how can acknowledging kind of vulnerabilities in I&Es help in creating better financial plans for the future, kind of just like you spoke about just then?
Yeah, there's a vulnerabilities. The whole topic in itself there's probably another full session we could cover talking about kind of vulnerability and the links to debt and mental health and debt. I suppose specifically, and just to answer the question concisely, the creditors who receive the I&E should and need to know about any particular vulnerabilities. There's lots of regulation in place which says they need to treat you based on kind of and help you manage those particular vulnerabilities. And creditors are really active. They'll will want to know that information, but there's still a bit of a disconnect, and customers being worried. If I share this, what does it mean? Is it going to restrict me from services? Are people going to treat me differently? Short answer is that the creditors won't. They need to know about it, and they will adapt. Using our system, we can put a vulnerability flag on. Now it doesn't go and have to go into a lot of detail. It's just enough for that creditor to be able to have an open conversation with the customer. So asking ultimately, what are your needs? What do I need to do? How can I adapt my conversation? How to adapt my style? How to adapt my communication channels to you as a customer to help you communicate with me, to help you navigate through this situation. So that's kind of where we start with IE Hub, and we have lots of our partners, and we have support partners. We bring everybody together as a network. So our support partners can help our clients and help deliver additional training, give additional materials to help. And ultimately, part of the IE Hub is building a network. And we try and have that. There's the network in terms of the income and expenditure being able to share. But equally, we've got a network of clients, and we'll introduce clients to each other and make sure that everyone's got the right support. We can share best practice. And ultimately, everyone's focused on doing the right thing and getting that right outcome for the customer.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. If anyone is interested and wants to learn more about IE Hub, we'll include our links in the description. But thank you very much, Mark, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem.